This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Ka-chow, homebrew community.
What's up, my homie brewers?
This is TC, Travis Campbell.
And I'm Mike Persine, and you're listening to Brew Strong.
Brew Strong. Good intro, Mike. I like that.
Yeah,
right, so Travis,
give it a shot.
Oh, yeah. I dig it. Travis and Mike here while Jamil's away. Look, we know the quality of the humor is going to drop off, while we fill in for Jamil, but we're going to try to keep the tech talk up to a good level, keep you satisfied. And so what we're doing today, we're going to do a double Q&A, back-to-back shows. Hope if anyone's in live, you stick around, maybe ask some questions while you're at it. And don't forget to send your questions in. Look, we have a mandate. We have to clear the backlog of Q&A questions. There's no shortage, but we are answering the new ones first. More of that later. So, Mike, what have you been brewing?
Well, been kind of taking it easy. In wintertime, I kind of shut down because I brew outside with the propane and whatnot. So kind of January, February in Nevada is northern Nevada is pretty cold. So I kind of wrap it up. I got a north facing driveway. But I did right before the new year brew my brand new, it's a hazy pale ale. So it's not as strong enough, I would call an IPA, but I went with all the haze and all the stuff. I used a thiolizing yeast, Cosmic Punch from Omega, and then it's actually 100% Simcoe. So
nice,
little screwdriver in there you wouldn't think with hazy. So it's been really tasty. It's really coming to its own. I finally canned it all up Sunday before the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl canning was really fun. How about you?
So brewing wise, I don't really pause in the winter. I used to kind of take a break. I'm kind of getting away from that. And I just got back to, I need, I'm in the Master Homebrewers program, which it's becoming known. What is it? AHA just put out a notice. Oh, BJCP just put out a notice that they're partnering up on some badges. It's a nice little program that maybe we'll discuss one day. But I need one more IPA scoring 43 or better, not in the style I have so far, and I will be hero of hops. So I've got like IPA, DIPA, white Belgian IPA, a few other things. I've got 6. I don't have a rye, I don't have a brown, I don't have a brut. So I just brewed a rye, and I'm finishing up the brown right now. Are they going to be 43s? I don't know. I got to brew them really well, and I got to get the right judge, and hope and prayer. One more 43, and I get hero of hops. And so
nice.
It's just more traditional styles. I mean, I guess brown IPA is traditional. It's not really traditional, but there it is.
Yeah.
So I haven't gotten exotic. I did a bunch of exotics beforehand, and I got back to normal more lately because I did too many exotics in a row. But I mean, not exotic like you did. I'm like too deep exotic. Like, okay, now I got to drink 5 gallons of this crap exotic,
Yeah, that has happened.
Yeah.
But for the what is it? The
Master Homebrewers program?
No, yeah, but okay. So does hazy
Hero
count in that?
hops.
Hero of hops.
Yeah, I've crossed 43 on my hazy as well.
Nice.
Yes, basically everything that's 21B or 21C or 21A will qualify. And 22A double IPA. American Strong Ale doesn't, or I already have it. And that's ridiculous because you can't make an American Strong Ale without a buttload of hops.
Right.
Maybe that one does count, but barley wine doesn't. You can't do an American barley wine. One of those two that should count doesn't count. Anyway.
It's like a hoppy beer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily IPA, but if it's a hero of hops in general, I could see those really hoppy ales.
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
I've lobbied. I've lost.
The Master Brewers. I need to find out more about this. I'll get with you. I'm gonna see what's up.
Yeah, so I've low-key offered to do a show with one of their guys. Friend of mine, Matt Harold, he started it. And you know how friends go. Matt starts something, me and James make fun of him, then it turns out huge.
Yeah.
And then he like hands it off, let somebody else take care of it. He starts something else. James and I make fun of him, and it turns huge again. Same gentleman that has the Mean Brews channel on YouTube. Started off the Master Homebrewers program. Yeah. We made fun of him for both of them, but they both turned out pretty
and now
righteous.
They turned out great.
Yeah. Anyway. So I need a hero of hops. All right. So again, this is a double Q&A show. We're going to do two hours of Q&A back to back, broken up. If you're listening live, you get 2 hours of all kinds of questions. If you're not listening live, you'll get one now and another one when JP gets around to polishing up this turd.
Someday.
Now he catches up pretty quick. We have to get him out there for him. All right. So Mike, I thought we'd jump in with a short question.
Hit it.
Of course, not in the sequence I gave them to you, unfortunately. Daniel writes, Jay-Z, I'm a partial mash, full boil, first year brewer and recent PFC in the BN Army. Justin, thanks you. I recall you and Palmer talking about tannin issues resulting from mashing for too long. I'm trying to wrap my mind around the process and have been trying to get clarification on what is too long. I found a couple of boards referencing overnight or extended mashes, and that just has me more confused. So, can you mash for too long? And what is too long? Is it entirely grain dependent, or is there a reference point? I usually do my partial mash and just include crystals and chocolate malts in the bag. Thanks for your help and all you do for beer. He's got some stuff I don't entirely understand, and then he teases JP. That's not cool, man. But anyway, thank you, Daniel. So, Mike, what do you think about that?
With mashing, I don't think that the length of time is going to be any different on extracting tannins. I think there is quite the argument to be made that going more than 90 to 100 minutes is kind of diminishing returns. You don't need to be waiting that long unless you're using really unmodified stuff. And if you're stepping and doing all kinds of maybe you'll end up total time 2 hours or so. But really, tannins are extracted by either too much temperature or too much pH. You really got to keep the pH below 6, and you really want to never get over I'd say 160, or 170, I guess would be the number I think is really getting too hot, and you could really end up with some gnarly flavors. So that's where I'm at with it. What about you, TC?
Well, I think you're 100% correct on that. Because I know why people mash overnight. And I'm almost surprised you haven't come across this. Okay, I have less time to brew. I have a tiny little baby. I don't know when I'm going to be able to wake up and do things. So I start to mash at night, and I let it run 6, 8, 10 hours. Not if I can help it. And now tannins don't become an issue at the standard temperatures, in my experience. It's you get too warm, you draw too long, you're trying to get the last bit of sugar out, so you keep pulling your hot liquor through it, and your pH rises. That's when you're going to run into tannins. And I give you a couple tips on that too. Acidify your HLT, and you're not going to go over 6. Work on your recipe so you don't have to draw it forever, and because then you're going to have to boil it forever too. But yeah, if you acidify your HLT, you're not going to go over 6 typically. So the other part of his question, is it entirely grain dependent? And that is interesting, because I don't really think about it, because we don't brew with enough of it. But huskless grains, they're not going to throw the tannins anyway. But, I mean, you have a 100% wheat beer, 100% carafa special beer. I don't know what you're making. A dark wheat that's going to, it's not going to run off very well. You can have some problems, by the way, in stuck mash. But yeah, so it is grain dependent. But if you're doing things in a normal basis, you're not going to have the issue, in my experience.
Yeah, I would say maybe if you're worried about it and you want to do this overnight mash, maybe steer clear of roasted malts, like roasted barleys with the husk on, like you're saying, because or add those in the morning. You can always stain your mash with those kind of malts. You don't need to let them sit in there. They're not going to contribute fermentable sugars that need to be in there very long or longer. So food for thought if you're making something really dark and you don't want to end up with those overly roasty extractions.
Good stuff. Daniel, thank you for your email. I think we did you justice on that one. I don't want to admit how long you might have been waiting for that answer, but there it is.
You got it.
All right, so let's we're gonna take our first break here for just a second, and right back with some more questions.
Exclusively on ESPN Plus, UFC 313, Saturday. Reigning light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira defends his title against number one contender Magomed Ankalaev, and an explosive lightweight bout between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev. UFC 313, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPB.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on two gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller, and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at BlickmanEngineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
And we're back. Brew Strong with TC and Big Mike filling in for Jamil.
What's up?
And if you didn't listen from the beginning, you got to go back and hear Mike's hello. It's classic. I love it. All right.
It might stick. It might stick.
So I have a question here. I'm going to approach it in two parts. First part's today. Second part's going to be later on. We had a recent pro brewer on, Mufasa. He is the decoction master, and I'm going to let him add some color to this afterwards. But Jeff had just asked this question, so I wanted to give him some feedback on it sooner rather than later. So you and I, Mike, we can do it some justice, and later we'll revisit with Mufasa, and he can add a little bit. Or you might have answers I don't have, because I'm not much of a decoctionist. I think we're both.
I'm not either, but I can help out a little, I guess. I've done a lot of reading on it.
All right, so Jeff asks about the Earlsh decoction. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce this. He writes, I want to do an Earlsh decoction. A pro brewmaster in a Chicago brewery, describes how the decoction water to grain weight ratio controls maltiness of the finished beer. How is the quarts per pound ratio determined when using the malt basket and anvil? Curious to know thoughts of others. I believe this method requires some degree of calculation rather than estimation for the purpose of improvement of the next brew attempt. If needed, I use Brewfather for my brewing. You can search for the Earlsh. It's EARL apostrophe SCHE, and you'll probably find the same link I found where it's described. And I'll give the description. because this is different for decoction. With this method, you only add 50% of mash water and 60 to 70% of your grain. Oh, I should back up. This is intended for brewing a bag, all-in-one type system where you're staying in your vessel throughout. You don't have as much option to, maybe you don't have a spare. It's for a compact system, not somebody who's got all the bells and whistles or just most of the bells and whistles. So you add 50% of your mash water and 60 to 70% of your grain into your all-in-one, you're brewing a bag. Do a 149 degree rest for 30 minutes, 162 for 30-minute step, and then leaving the grain basket in, bring it to a boil. This is where you're actually doing your decoction. So you're decocting with 50% of your water, 60 to 70% of your mash. Boil it for 20 minutes. Then you add the rest of your water, which needs to be cold, so let's call it room temp, and rest the grain. Now, that's a little bit of a play there with the boil and the other 50% of your water. You want to nail that temperature so you end up at the rest you're looking for. And in this case, following along, 149-ish the whole way. So he's probably making a light lager or a Helles, or it could be a bigger lager, but it's a lighter grained, drier finishing lager. Nothing malty like Bock like or Doppelbock. Then go through the 2 mash steps again and mash out. Well, I didn't read this whole thing. You're spending a day on
Go through
this.
the 2 mash steps again.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No. Okay, so you go 149, 162, boil, and you re-add to get to 149, and you bring it to 162.
You kind of step it twice.
And then mash out. Yeah, so with all the grain gets stepped. Half the grain, 60 to 70% of the grain gets stepped twice. Okay, so it's an interesting technique, to say the least. I can tell you what Mufasa told me, Mike, if you want, and I can tell you what I know about all-in-ones. If you
I
want to
want to
take any
hear
stab at any of this verse.
I loved hearing what he had to say about decoction in our
I'd like
previous
to
episode with him.
See what he's thinking
I'm gonna
first before
disappoint
I step on a rake.
Yeah, no, so all right, so Mufasa looked at this, and looking at the ratios, he said this is going to be something on the maltier side. It intrigued him, and as a purist, he did not lift his nose at it or anything. So I think he dug it. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't advise other homebrewers on this technique if he reads more about it. But we'll find out in the future on that. So yes, you will get a maltier approach with this than your typical decoction, where you pull off X amount of your very thick mash and boil it separately and add it back in, because you're full on decocting 60 to 70% of your grain. It's quite a large decoction technically. But a part of what Jeff asked, the ratio. So there's a ratio issue here, and you might have to adjust this depending on your equipment. I know Jeff from the Anvil Facebook page, so he's using an Anvil. I love my Anvil. The only thing I don't love about my Anvil is the space below it and the space around the basket. This is a unused mash space, and if you don't recirculate properly, you end up with water sitting there that doesn't get very wordy. It doesn't get a whole lot of extract
The
in it.
mixing kind of falls off. Yeah.
Yes, it's you've got to do the right thing to take, to make use of that space. It's not rocket science, but it's not, forget about it. Your efficiency drops off. So yes, Jeff, you need to be concerned with the volume inside the basket of water, and then you can figure out your mash to grain ratio on that. So I did calcs way back when, and I got 1.056 gallons of water under the basket. Then I actually weighed the water and added it in, and I got closer to about 12 ounces of water under the basket. So there's an error in my calculation somewhere. Roughly outside of the basket, when you're full up to about 6 gallons, you're 2.4 gallons are outside of that basket. So out of 6 gallons, you've only got 3.6 actually in your mash. Your ratios are really jumping up. Getting to 6.
No, but does he? Sorry to catch up. Is the Anvil recirculating though? Like, is there kind of a flow to this?
Yes, but if you don't manage how that recirculates, you that water on the outside amazingly. It's very still.
It just sits there. Yeah.
So you're getting the ratio. You're getting the ratio of the the liquid that's inside the basket. So you would want to consider that when you consider your decoction. Thermal loading, all that kind of stuff outside the basket, that's definite, but your decoction's not benefiting from that as part of your ratio. if you're targeting the ratio. And seeing as this tip comes from the Chicago brewery, I'm betting they don't have a basket. So their full volume is your basket volume. So your basket volume would have to be 50% of your mash water. And it's already pretty close when you consider 3.6 versus 2.4 outside the basket. So yeah, you'd have to consider that math. But really, you need to brew it a couple times to see how it comes out and tweak it.
And I would think, along with brewing it a couple times to kind of get your volumes all straight with getting it back down to 149. I do kind of like that when you're just adding cold water back. And so you don't really have to worry about, pulling off too much into your kettle and then going back and it's, you have extra, or, and you pull the temperature up too high with that boiled stuff. So from my point of view, I think it'd be pretty easy to nail pretty close. I mean, you might end up a little bit high or low on your total mash volume once you get all your grains in there. But yeah, I mean, I would think, and it maybe decide what you want to do with kind of the body and the flavor, if you need to do that second step or do it, or just go to 149 and then hold it for another 30 minutes or so, kind of, because I've always heard stepping builds more body. It's kind of counterintuitive, but you can add body with steps. And so maybe the first step and then up to the boil was enough for you. And it does end up being a lot of taster's preference and kind of your preference as the brewer. So I think it's kind of neat, especially for guys that are one vessel or, brewing a bag or, the solo stuff that they thought they really didn't have a way to do this. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it is too. It's great input. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll add to this is you definitely want the water you add back in to be on the colder side of expected. With the all-in-ones, it's so easy to dial up the temperature, but you don't want to have to get your chiller out and drop the temperature. So, and also if you're ignoring the wort on the outside, it's already warm. You're not adding back in a full 50% of your water. You're going to be adding in more like 30% of your water. So you might even have to have significantly cooler water.
Yeah, and that's where I was thinking there's heat equations to figure out the volume of water at what temperature, when you mix them together, what's the final temperature, kind of more in-depth thermodynamic stuff you could do if you really wanted to figure it out. But I think if you just had a good amount and you'd add, you get do 20-30%, let it equilibrate, check the temp, and kind of walk it down like you're saying. And then I guess for you, undershooting would be easier than not having enough and being too hot, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay,
absolutely. And then once you finish, just send us some bottles and we'll let you know how it came out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm really intrigued by decoction because I've heard it both ways about its importance or non-importance, and I'm so intrigued to try beers side to side, or try them that have been and some that haven't, and see what's good. Try to build that out in my experiences.
So. Sounds like you set yourself up for a challenge.
Yeah, it's on my calendar this year. I want to do a decoction. I want to do a real deal, decocted Pilsner, and see how we do, because I've made pills in the past and I know what that's supposed to taste like, and maybe I'll throw a little decoction in there.
Yeah, you sent me an excellent lager.
Yeah, that was my pre-prohibition one. Is that the one I sent you? Yeah, that was. So. I'm going to make that this year, and I'm thinking about decocting it. I don't know yet. More to follow. But
I think that's the one.
Yeah.
All right. So Jeff, we'll get you some more info. It'll be, maybe in a month or so. But
stay tuned.
Yes. Dial back in. All right. Eric writes in, "Thank you, boys, for all you do to help us become better at the craft. And thank you, John and Drew, for paying for it so I don't have to." That's right. Thank you, Drew. We forgot to mention Drew's equipment.
Who
We're
are
going to
those
catch
guys?
back up on that. Recently brewed a Sweet Baby Jesus clone, peanut chocolate porter. You familiar with it?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I've had peanut butter chocolate porters before.
Is that
but I haven't
out
had
east
this
or
one.
something?
I don't know.
I've had peanut butter chocolate stouts.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're delicious.
The recipe called for a 30-day post-fermentation aging before carbonating, and I wasn't sure the best way to do it. Once fermentation was complete, I transferred the beer to a corny keg with PB2 and cocoa nibs, purged the headspace with CO2, and put the keg in a basement storage room that is consistently in the 50s. Turned out great, but I don't know what effect the aging process had on the finished beer. What flavor changes are happening during the aging process? How long is too long? Any suggestion on what ages best worst in stouts slash porters? Thanks, Eric. Peanut butter stout, peanut butter chocolate porter. I've not had that one. I don't know where it's at, but I've had others of the style. But no, Mike, please take the first stab.
Well, I think his first question was just about aging beers in general, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
Kind of. Yeah. And for me, I am a firm believer that beers mature and age in the bright tank and the fermenter. I mean, these things will change over time as they rest, and I think part of that is, physical changes where the beer's clarifying and things are dropping out of it that have flavor. And then also, I believe there's also some chemical changes happening there where certain things are modifying and changing and interacting with each other. And so, in my experience, and I do this with every beer I make it. It's an ale has 2 weeks in the fermenter, and then it goes to my bright tank, which for me is a 10-gallon keg that I've kind of converted. And I am at a minimum usually wanting to see 10 to 14 days of that beer. I mean, any style. And I would even strongly encourage people to do this with hoppy styles like IPA, pale ale, hazy. You'll and just try it when you first keg it, and then try it in 2 weeks, and kind of you can taste it throughout, and you will notice the change. The flavors mature, they become more defined. I believe, especially in hoppy beers, the flavors really do become more defined and recognizable. And I would say the same with lager and dark beer and everything. It's just really, really strongly recommend that. I would say, like I said, with ales, 2 weeks to a month, maybe as short as 10 days, depending on the style. But that's usually enough to achieve what I'm looking for. With lagers, it definitely could be longer. I usually do about 4 weeks a month. Sometimes 60 days is needed, though. I mean, sometimes these beers just they're not ready yet, and if you kind of know what you're looking for through experience. I mean, the best way I can find it is it just every time you try it, it just keeps tasting better to you. I mean, it's kind of like this is good, and then you try it in a week, and man, it's actually gotten better as it's been sitting. The flavors are getting more beautiful as I drink this or try it over time. So that's where I'd be at is with the waiting. And then as far as you know how to rest it, I would get it off the yeast first off. You want to kind of separate it from that. I don't mind carbonating. I know in his question he was going to do post fermentation aging before carbonating, but I don't think that's really required.
I would keep some pressure on it regardless.
Yeah.
It helps
And
keep
then
the keg sealed.
right. And then as far as the PB2 and cocoa nibs, I would say again, if you rack onto those, I would definitely kind of be sampling and really working on, is it better or worse or the same kind of, if your palate's set, sensitive, sometimes people will just go, I don't know, it tastes good, I'm just going to go with it. But honestly, I haven't really used too much cocoa nibs or PB2, so kind of out of my expertise there. But as far as the aging goes, I'm all about it. Like, I really think as homebrewers, we're lucky that we can take that extra time and do things that pro brewers they got so much volume they got to get out. They've got distributors waiting. They don't a lot of times have that luxury, and we do. So that's my response to that.
Mike, I agree with everything you said, and yeah, you making my part easier. Thank you. And I want to point out, this is Mike who brews Big Mike brews lots of NEPAs.
Yeah.
Even in NEPA, I mean, people say, oh, I want a NEPA at 2-3 days. I don't want a NEPA at 2-3 days. I want a NEPA at 7 to 14 days minimum. And what Mike didn't say, and it's a tangent, package well. And then
that is big.
age
Yes.
it. And yes, aging does help. And so Eric was nervous about his PB2 and his cocoa nib aging. Those probably PB2, definitely cocoa nibs, and don't use cocoa nibs. Use cocoa powder, by the way. Cocoa nibs is great for marketing. Cocoa powder is great for beer. It's not that cocoa nibs are bad. If you don't have the surface area, that's like a fatty product. The beer doesn't want to pull it up. You need time for it to sit on there. And so if you're going to age it and you're going to sample it, get one of those floaty devices, so you pull off the top and see just how long it takes those cocoa nibs to come up to the top. Don't do that. Every week or so, give it a shake because the beer sitting on the cocoa is not going to pull up what you want. You want to get that cocoa into solution. Peanut butter, PB2, I imagine, unless they defat it, it's also fatty. And if you're 15% stout, you might cut into that fatty pretty good,
Right.
but you're not picking up as much as you'd like. So aging, wonderful. I mean, some of the best pints of my beer, the last pints as the keg's running out. And
Totally.
aging on PB2, aging on cocoa nibs, cocoa powder, you're going to need time to pick up those flavors. You can, I mean, Eric, if I were you, next time I brewed this, I might put them, during chilling. I might not wait to age. Might let it go through the ferment process and see how different it is. Only if you're more of in a rush, or if you just have the opportunity to see what the difference is. Because then you have your week or so of fermentation that's already sitting on it. Although you do risk it falling out during fermentation, but you will pick up more of it when you add it to warm wort. Don't add it at flame out. Maybe when you hit 160, add some before it gets too cool and you don't feel safe adding it. But you're going to put your beer on top of it anyway, so you must be pretty comfortable with adding it to cold beer. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
I think any increase in temperature is going to increase the speed at which the flavors are extracted. I would even think if you add it warm, like at the end of fermentation, kind of like a dry hop, that's going to be way better than 32, 31 degrees in your fridge.
absolutely.
Which is what I'm doing when I'm conditioning, is I'm trying to be, 30, 31 degrees Fahrenheit and really trying to go from there.
Right. All right. So Eric, yeah, thanks for the question. Let's go ahead and take our second break, and then we're going to come back, and we have a question from Scott in the chat. And if Scott's hanging on, Scott, we're going to answer at least one of your two questions, or the second one might be a comment. All right. Right back.
Take your plans out of the group chat and get long weekend ready in new Abercrombie. From day to night, pack new outfits for every part of your itinerary. Grabbing brunch? Throw on the A&F Mila dress. Then head to your dinner reservation in their new bubble hem mini dress. And yes, permission to overpack for pics with the girls. Abercrombie's best-selling Scarlet Squirt deserves a post in your feed. Your plans are worth it. Shop Abercrombie's new long weekend collection online or in store.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
And we're back. And, I forgot to bring it up, Mike, but our good friends over at Blickman Engineering,
Yes, sir.
they don't do anything that just doesn't make your brew day easier. I mean, the beer gun, it's I don't even think twice about that's what I fill with. You're a little fancier. I think you're canning. You're not using a beer gun with a can. Do you have a canner?
No, I'm using a beer gun. I love
In
it.
the cans.
I'm a beer.
Outstanding.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you get it all tuned up right, beer gun is the thing to use with canning. I've found. I mean, you can spend a ton of money on counter pressure fillers and all
Hmm.
these crazy tech, but I mean, I've used beer guns, canned the beer, and it sits in my fridge for 4 or 6 months and comes out tasting just like the day I canned it. So it is doing the job.
And
I,
I've had your cans. They are fresh. They're popping
yeah.
when they make it all the way to me
Oh yeah,
in hot Houston. Yeah.
yeah. Like yeah, I definitely want to do a show or a segment one of these days on how I'm tuning that up and getting it to foam just right, so that when I put the lid on there, it's really, you're lidding on foam instead of capping
Hmm.
on foam.
Right. Right.
But
Seaming
no,
on
I
foam.
yeah, I think Blickman, I love that innovating your brew day. That's just the perfect way to say it. They have all the little gadgets and gizmos and tanks and fermenters that are going to be designed to make your day easier and simpler. I think that's the true mark of a good engineer is their designs are simple and elegant, and things like the auto sparge, the Riptide, the new kettle they do that doesn't have a coil in it. I mean, geez, talk about easy cleaning. That's
Do you have the
amazing. So
Riptides?
I do run a Riptide. I have a rims rocket too for my
Oh,
mash tun.
nice.
So I'm doing
Yeah.
rims, and then I even have the auto sparge. So when I'm fly sparging with my gravity liquor tank here, I just
Hmm.
open the valve and forget about it for an hour.
Yes.
So
I bought all
that's
my
great.
pumps before the Riptide came out, and I see that pump, and I have pump envy. That's such a nice looking pump. I mean, it's not just the fact that okay, you can purge it easy, right? Because these pumps don't like air. They won't pull
Yeah.
they won't self
Yeah.
prime. You got
Yeah.
to
Super
prime
easy to
them.
prime.
Yeah, but it's all TC fittings. It's just the whole head TC is onto the body. It's just a very cool system.
Yeah, I think the coolest part about that is that the actual volute of the pump is TC to the frame.
Yeah.
So when you need to separate it to clean everything, like let's say, it's that time of the year, you made a mess and you gotta get in there. It's 2 seconds and that thing comes apart. And I will say they've got the NPT fittings and they've got the TC fittings. Um, the thing pumps like crazy. It produces a ton of head. I always have to really throttle it down because it's got a lot of power. So
Very nice. I like
yeah,
that. So, on the horrible day that my pumps die, Riptides are coming up next.
yes, sir. I vote yes.
All right. So Scott in the chat, have either of you entered a beer in the clone category, and do the judges have the commercial version there to compare? Um, Mike, have you entered a clone, or have you even
I
looked
have
at any?
not. I
Have you
actually didn't know that was a BJCP style, and all the if it isn't, if it is, I haven't heard of that. But
it's a thing in BJCP competitions. If it's a category, I don't recall, but so I've intentionally not entered clones, but I've paid attention to enough of them to get it get a gist to help you, Scott. I'm not sure of your competition, Scott, that you're interested in, but the ones I've seen have either specified that this is what you have to clone, and that's great if you love the beer, and it's ridiculous if you don't love that beer. And another one, I think this one was planned and might be canceled. They were like, these are the 5 beers you can clone, but if you clone something else, send the beer in with it. So that's how they handled it. So you would expect the judges to have those 5 or that one, or you would provide the one that you're cloning. But I don't think it's an official category. Actually, I'm all but positive it's not an official category because you only see it on competitions that specifically allow for a clone. And I enter many competitions, a handful a year, where they're open to all BJCP, and
yeah,
that's not part
that's where
of
I'm
it.
at.
Yeah. So
It sounds kind of fun. It's
if
like
you
that.
like the beer
Can
you're
you brew
cloning,
it? Can you
yeah.
brew it? Competition, like that'd be cool.
So because it's not specific BJCP, even though it's a side piece of a BJCP competition, the rules are not hard and fast that I'm aware of. So you would want to pay attention to the rules for the competition you were entering to figure out if that's something you were interested in. So really helpful, right? We didn't tell you anything you didn't already know.
Yeah.
Let's see. And Scott has a tip on using his anvil foundry for decoction matches. He has used an induction plate setup right next to the kettle. So Scott's like me. I don't work all in one with my anvil. I have my anvil plus I have an HLT. It cuts down. I don't have to have a separate mash tun because I mash in my kettle. But I didn't buy my anvil to have one single unit. I bought my anvil because it's flexible and powerful, and I was coming down to 5 gallons off a 10-gallon setup. So yeah, get you if you don't mind having an extra piece, get you a hot plate and do your decoction on the side of it, and then maybe you can compare it to the Earlsh method. Do both the Earlsh method and
Yeah,
do
get into it.
a more standard decoction. So thanks for that. All right. Let's see what else. What other goodies are in the mailbag here? All
Start
right.
digging in there.
Yeah.
Oh, there's one.
All right. Trevor, not Travis, but Trevor. Trevor writes in and he was looking for a full-on show, but we're gonna handle part of this as just as a question for our Q&A today. Hey guys, I was just thinking of making a maple and brown sugar oatmeal stout. I want to use maple syrup and molasses to get the flavors I'm looking for. That got me wondering how I should brew with these simple sugars to get the flavor that represents those ingredients. There's so many different simple sugars that can be used in brewing. What are they, and what are the ways they can be utilized? Brew strong, Trevor.
Brew strong.
Well, thank you, Trevor, for that question. I think I shortened it to make it a Q&A question. We might do a expanded show on it one day, covering it more in depth as a general set of beer ingredients or a revisit, because I'm positive the gentlemen have spoken on some simple sugars in the past. Mike, what would you do to get the flavors of the sugar actually into your beer?
Well, I will start this conversation off with the fact that I would not prefer a sweet beer, but I acknowledge that people do like them, especially like dessert beers, or you're trying to do something like this with maple syrup, which is very, very sweet. And
Mhm.
I was kind of kicking around what you could do, and honestly, any simple sugar you put in there is going to be consumed by the yeast, and you will lose any sweetness and trade it for booze. So I would be on the side of, if you're looking for just a straight sweet, you don't want to add body or kind of a milky flavor to it. You just want sweet. I would think the sugar alcohols like your aspartame, your sucralose, which are your sweet and lows and stuff. You only need like a tenth of the same equivalent sugar to get the amount of sweetness you're looking for. So it'd be very small. I would almost like flavor it to taste, like pour a pint out and get the exact weight of that pint, and then add a certain weight of the sugar, and really kind of see where you want to, or not the sugar, but the sugar alcohol or sugar substitute,
Yeah.
and kind of tune it to where you want it, and then kind of scale that for your dose to your main batch. Because I would think you could very easily overdo it and end up with just sweet tea but beer.
Right.
So that and I know people are uncomfortable with those sugar substitutes. There's the internet has and people have really strong feelings about it, but in terms of achieving just that sweet candy like flavor, I don't think milk sugar would do it for you, and other sweet things aren't going to bring a lot of other flavors to the game. So you're just looking like, I would still brew it with maple syrup to get the maple flavors. And even if you have like a maple syrup extract that maybe doesn't have all the sugar, but just has a lot of that mapley flavor, and then kind of on the back end, build out the level of sweetness you're looking for with the synthetic sweeteners or sweetener alternatives. So that's
Mike,
where
I'm glad
that would be my approach.
I'm glad we're discussing this because I think we can add to each other's story here. So do you speak French?
Parlez-vous français? No.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So
That's it.
I don't either. But so I just call the beer Duchesse de Bourgogne, which is the Duchess of Burgundy. That is a sour it's got some vinegar sweetness to it, but Many are of the opinion that it definitely has aspartame, or what's the pink stuff that gives you cancer?
Yeah, that's sucralose is sweet and low, I think, and then what's the other one? It's a
Sucralose.
yellow.
It's
Then there's
yeah,
aspartame, and then there's erythritol, and there's all the different ones.
yeah. So
Stevia,
it's
if you're into that, the tea leaf extracts.
yeah. So people
Um,
believe that they're back sweetening that beer with something that won't ferment out. It's a sour because you're making a bottle bomb if you add real sugar back into that. So
right,
back sweeten,
because
yes,
yeah, those sours keep going, right? That's the whole thing.
right.
They sit there forever and keep going.
Now within reason, mash warm, use more unfermentable malts perhaps, and you're going to have some residual sweetness. But again, I caution within reason because that's going to get a sweetness that you may not care for. And then there's some tricks on getting the flavors of the sugars. I'm not saying I'm a fan of these tricks, but maple syrup is supposed to get that flavor from fenugreek. So adding the herb fenugreek, I'm assuming it's an herb, fenugreek to your beer in a certain dose, you get that maple syrup flavor.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now, if I were going, and I do, for molasses, I definitely do like a C60, backing it up, get some residual sweetness out of that C60 to back up the molasses flavor.
Right.
I have that in my brown ale. My brown IPA is going to be significantly drier than my brown ale. So you kind of want to match the sugar with the malt that supports it, and you can think of that in reverse. The Belgians use the sugar that supports the malt they're using. So if they're making a Belgian strong gold, they're going to use the light candy sugar and so forth. They're going to use like the what is it, C90 or D90, whatever they call it for their Belgian strong
Mhm.
dark, because they use the sugar to back the malt. In this case, we're talking about a malt to back the sugar. And if it's not sweet enough, use Mike's technique, figure out what works, and small doses, baby steps. Don't overdo it.
Yeah. Yeah. I always hazard, like, if you're trying to make a sweet beer through fermentation, like some people try to do like arrested fermentations and stuff, but that's going to leave a lot of diacetyl precursors, and you can end up with some butterscotch or popcorn flavors. And then even I
Yes.
would say with the warmer mashing, I mean that to me is going to build more body
Yeah.
than sweetness. And
Mhm.
so I do like the sugar idea. Like if you're looking for like a caramel molasses or something with that kind of extra flavor than just sweetness, yes, I love that. So
Mhm.
that's where like he's like I know he was asking about that in the question, so that's what I would do first. But yeah, if it's not to your liking, I think the end of the day, you've got more options with the artificial sweeteners.
Yeah. And you hit on something really good there. Don't just terminate your fermentation. That's not the way. Let it finish. And if you didn't get what you wanted, tweak the recipe for next time, but let the
Yeah,
fermentation finish. Help the fermentation finish.
yeah, because healthy fermentation makes great beer. That's Jamil Zainashev's
Yep.
all-time number one quote. Great beers from great fermentations.
All right. We're going to take one last break, and we're going to come right back at you in just a minute here.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right. And we're back with the toughest question that I've ever had here on Brew Strong. Peter Simons is asking us what the meaning of life is. And the biggest issue I have is, Peter, if you don't know it, I don't know either. Just because I'm
What is
I'm
the
hoping
meaning
you
of
can tell
life?
me one day. Yeah.
Well,
Let's have another beer and do a Q&A
how
while we're thinking about
philosophical
that.
do you want to get? Like
Right.
free will or religion?
All right.
I go with beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. So
I like that one.
there you go.
All right.
That's my philosophy for the week.
We have a long question here. I don't know if the answer's long, but the question's long. So let's see how we can digest this. All right. Scott writes in, "Hey, John and Scott. When brewing with salt water, is it more important to focus on hitting the correct mash pH or adjusting water to achieve the desired water profile. In a previous show, you talked about hitting the correct mash pH as the first step in adjusting water. In my case, I am starting with very soft water. If I only adjust for the correct pH, this still leaves me with calcium, alkalinity, etc., deficient water. He gives us a description of his water. I guess that's the bulk of the questions. He tells us what's in his water, and he's right. It's not a whole lot of anything. It's pretty soft water.
Beautiful.
And he has a follow-up question that he sent in a separate email, which Scott, I don't know if I saw that one. Oh, no. I have the follow-up also, so we'll try to address that one separately. So, Mike, what are you doing with your water?
Well, I was kind of thinking about this and what would be a priority over one. And, there's the most important part about a brew day is, in terms of your water chemistry, is probably the mash pH. With that said, if you're using brewing salts and you're building the profile of the water to the style, that's going to affect the beer pH or mash pH, excuse me. So what I really encourage people to use the beer recipe calculators that have water chemistry ability. I believe Beersmith does it. I personally use our favorite guy, John Palmer's water adjustment app that's on iPhone. Nice. Super easy to use, super intuitive. If you have your water chemistry like out of the tap or whatever you're using, you can enter it in. And what I usually do then is I'm adding the salts first, or in the calculator, you would enter in the salts you want to do to get the flavor profile. And then the app then can go and get you to that residual alkalinity target that you want with your acid. And kind of just really, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can get the flavor profile, and, you can get your mineral nutrition for yeast health and all of that in one go. So I would say don't do it all at once with these apps. And then my only thing is, if you're using phosphoric acid as your, adjustment acid, I would add that before adding any salts to your water. What that does is it lowers the pH first before adding more calcium, so that you actually increase the solubility of apatite, which is a calcium phosphate salt that will precipitate if the pH gets too high. So you want to add the acid first, then salts, if you're using phosphoric like I do. So I'm using phosphoric. I just have had good results with it. So, but that's kind of where I'm at. How about you?
Yeah, so I like all of that, and I want to come back to what you finished with, because I really like where you were going with that. So if we're talking about on an ability level, if you're starting out in brewing, the first thing you need to do is focus on the pH. And if you're getting better, then you're going to start tweaking your salts. It's not hard to correct the pH after the salts, especially if you're using software, and you should be using software. If you're doing this by hand, great. I know a pro. He has a spreadsheet to do it all by hand, and his beers are coming out exactly where he wants them, which is very good beer. But the point being is he's hitting his targets. So you can do it by calculation if you want to set up your spreadsheets and have a whole lot of fun. Probably use a tool, and you're not going to have a hard time hitting your pH after you get your salts right for most beer styles. Some darker beers get a little trickier because they want to give you more acidity than you expect. And if you're chasing that total alkalinity and total hardness, that's always interesting, because our standard salts don't hit that as much as you think. Not as much as your tap water. Like, you got soft tap water, Scott. My tap water total alkalinity always 100 plus. So I'm trying to reproduce a beer I brewed with filtered tap water. I'm not going to add enough stuff to get my hardness up that high. It's just not going to do it. But I also use phosphoric, and it's almost twice as effective as lactic, which is interesting. Not having looked at the math behind that, but ml for
It's
ml.
a strong acid.
Yeah,
strong acid versus a weak acid.
Yeah. I mean, and you're looking at a bottle and you think, oh, this one's 80%, this one's 88%. Yeah, 80 and 88 are something different though. And
Yeah, it's
that 80
88% lactic, which is really concentrated, but
and not as strong as phosphoric, still
no,
at
because
80%.
because phosphoric acid is a polyprotic acid, so there's actually several hydrogens that are dissociating when it is in aqueous form.
That makes
Not to get
sense.
too chemistry based, but organic acids are going to be much weaker, like citric acid, uh, acetic acid, lactic acid. These always have way lower, you know, strength than inorganic
Yeah.
acids like your hydrochlorics, your nitric acids, your phosphoric acids, sulfuric acid. There's big time big boys.
So
Be
the question
careful.
I had, Mike, is if you were using lactic, wouldn't you still add that for? I mean, I like to add the acid first for the same reason as you, no matter what acid I'm using. Because if you got a little bit of baking powder in there, that's not really going to want to go into the water so well unless you drop the pH a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good idea for any kind of, I mean, for most of the salts we're using, the lower the pH, the more solubility they're going to have. The big one with phosphoric, like I said, is if you add too much calcium or there's already a lot of calcium in the water, or that wouldn't really. So if you add too much calcium, you could actually form apatite with the phosphate and precipitate a solid in your mash, and then it's consuming calcium and stuff like that, where you don't want to do that. But the last thing I'll say with your water, where it's really high alkalinity, the Palmer Water Adjustment app also includes a water dilution step. And so if you have high minerals in your water, you can calculate, how much RO water you can add to get the alkalinity where you'd like it. And I kind of want to also touch on the term I used, residual alkalinity, if nobody's heard of that. So there's a calculation to get what's called a residual alkalinity, where it's you take the hardness and the alkalinity and they kind of cancel each other out to a certain extent. And there's a formulation that will give you this number. And that's usually what we're trying to target with our water chemistry to then result in the proper pH with the malts that we're using. So in the water adjustment app, Palmer's water adjustment app, I highly encourage people to try it out. You pick the style of beer you're making, it'll give you a residual alkalinity range. And I usually like to go on the low side because for whatever reason, my beers, my pHs in my mashes have been a little higher than I was looking for. So I now target the bottom end of his range he gives. So just kind of just a little more information about residual alkalinity. But yeah, unless you're a chemist or you have a certain propensity for pain and spreadsheet, I don't know, just do that. I mean, the apps are all great. They kind of they just make it so simple. And one last thing I will say too is a lot of brewers will add their salts and acids to the mash. I've been doing that treatment to my liquor tank with the strike water. So I'm heating my strike water before I transfer it over to the mash tun, and that's where I'm adding my salts. But if you don't have a 3-vessel system, that's obviously not an option. But that's something that I like doing just so that I'm kind of treating everything I'm using. So
Yeah. So what I do is similar. I have the all-in-one. I set it up the night before. It has a built-in timer where I can say, okay, you're going to turn on in 7 hours. That's for better for worse. That is the adjustability. It's plus or minus an hour. So I'm waiting around to 10 o'clock at night, and I set it up to start at 5, so it's warm by 6, kind of thing. But
nice.
all my salts are in there. So when I add my grain the next morning, my salts are already in there. I'm not adding them to an active mash trying to get it all mixed up. I know what I'm starting with beforehand. And only other thing is if you're nervous about adding the acids, add half, then add your salts, and you can add more acid easily during the mash later on if you need to. But definitely get some acid in there so to help with the dissolution, or the more scientific term of getting all your salts into the water. So I wasn't looking to precipitate my Big Mike, but I have seen where it does not want to dissolve. It just wants to sit around, float around. But if you use chalk, you're gonna make something like a a stout. you're adding chalk even, that's just miserable to work with.
Yeah, I would not recommend using like a calcium carbonate, any of those ones that are just carbonates. The solubility on those is so bad.
Yeah.
I just think unless you have a problem with sodium in your water, you don't want to go over the sodium content, which there is a limit. Kind of you don't want to go far. Baking soda, like bicarbonate, is readily soluble. You're not going to have any issues. That's actually the species that exists in the pH range we're talking about. So, sorry, chemistry, but you want to use bicarbonates if you can't help it.
Good stuff. All right. Checking the chat. No one's being friendly and throwing us any bones over there. I think we have time for one more medium-ish question. I don't know if that one goes with others. Okay. I think we can. No, it's long. Dang it. All right. From John. Brew Strong Team. Hey, John. I'm looking for a way to add CO2 to my empty carboys before I rack my beer into a secondary. Can I use my draft system to say lay a blanket of CO2 on the bottom of the carboy before racking? That's all he wrote, fortunately.
Okay. To secondary, see, I kind of want to just be like, don't use a secondary.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I would say with the CO2 blanket, as long as your transfer is very slow, you should be fine. I would actually, maybe fashion some sort of mechanism to reach the bottom of the carboy and fill from the bottom, much like a beer gun. And then, run that for several seconds and then quickly start the transfer and kind of fill it like you would with a beer gun in a can or a bottle. Just kind of fill it up with CO2, then quickly start filling up, and then you kind of push the CO2 out with beer. That would work pretty good.
I think it would. But I like you said, don't do a secondary. But so why do we suppose John's doing a secondary? I mean, if he's when I think back when I did secondaries, it's because the instructions said to. I didn't know any better, and I have to think that they wanted me to do a secondary, honestly, to make the beer finish up. It's forcing the disturbance on the beer that I wasn't giving good temperature control. So you probably want to kick the yeast into gear a little bit to help them finish up.
One last bite at the apple. Yeah,
So
I could see that. I also think a lot of people use secondaries with fruits.
well, if you want to continue
other kind of
fermentation,
things,
get it off the
you
main
want to
yeast,
kind of get it away from the yeast cake, and have you can rack it onto that fruit or something kind of.
and then it ferments on the fruit, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's two of many concepts where you're expecting a little fermentation to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need the CO2 purge that bottle.
Right.
It's okay if it picks up some oxygen. If I'm not transferring a NEPA, and I better not be transferring a NEPA to a secondary, I don't have an issue with picking up some oxygen.
Yeah, and then the case could be made that even when you do transfer that, if it did have a good level of carbonation, say it was pretty cold when you went to go transfer, and it had that natural carbonation from the primary, you could have some foaming that would help you with limiting oxygen exposure. But yeah, I think I would not try this with oxygen sensitive beers like your hazies, IPAs, pale lagers, things like that. But yeah, I think in theory that would work, but the necessity for it,
right? And as Mike was saying, but to purge it, to really dilute it, you're going to use a lot of CO2. If you're fine with that, put your CO2 hose down there, run it for 30 seconds, pull it out, start adding your wort towards the bottom gently. It's going to lift that CO2. You're going to really reduce any potential for massive O2 intake. It'd be minimal O2 intake. You're not going to have a perfect transfer. I remember I was watching my transfer one day, and I guess I was transferring. This is a long time ago. I guess I was transferring to a secondary for whatever reason. I used to use the auto siphon. Did you ever use an auto siphon?
Yeah, I've used them.
So I was
Kinda
sitting. Do
kind
you
of
know
an
where I'm going
interesting
with this?
contraption.
So I could see right there where the auto siphon seal at the bottom met with the where the regular pocket of wort was, or beer at this point in time, coming up the inner straw, and it was pulling a constant flow of air through.
Oh no.
I was aerating my beer by using the auto siphon.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have mattered if whatever I transferred to was 100% CO2 purged. I was aerating. That was before NEPAs were known to me. That was 15 years ago, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say with those kind of things, I was doing gravity transfers and stuff like that, and then I kind of was like, why are I was doing West Coast like kind of fresh squeeze clones and stuff when I was first starting out. I'm like, where is all my flavor going? Why is this beer just disappearing before my eyes? And I learned the hard way about oxygen and IPA. So yeah, not suggested.
So step one is consider if you need a secondary. Step two, consider if you really need to have it purged of CO2. And step three, be prepared to use a bunch of CO2 and transfer very carefully.
Yeah.
Yep.
Agree.
All right, Mike. Well, I think we have one in the books here. Just want to remind all of our what'd you call them?
My homie brewers.
That's right. All our homie brewers out there. I don't want to use Mike's word because it's his word. I love
It's
it.
not my word.
Oh, that's cool. So
Yeah.
remember to check out Blickman Engineering and all of our other fine sponsors. They'd love to hear from you. Email Drew at I'm gonna have to remember his email address now.
I think it's feedback at blickmanengineering.com or something like that.
That is it. Or hit one of his Facebook pages.
Yeah.
They
DM him.
monitor.
Slide in his DMs.
But let me know how that works out.
Just slide in the DM.
Yeah. So thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And again, if you're live, you can choose to sit through another one of these painful shows, hang out with us, or you can tune out. But we're coming back shortly. Thanks everybody. Brew strong.
Brew strong.